Hey guys, it's Linda Winner from Winner Designs. Now, if you're not familiar with me, that's W-I-N-N-E-R. WinnerDesigns.com. There's no T. Winner, winner, chicken dinner, opposite of loser. However you need to find me, Winner Designs. Linda Winner. I'm an educator from Martelli, but I have my own line of templates that have our no-slip material on it. This stuff here, you'll see all about it when I start cutting. If this is new to you, you need to check out all the other videos I have because this stuff is amazing. But today I want to teach you about the storage pods. Storage pods are amazing, and I have been waiting to do this video for a while. This is a little guy. This is a little storage pod. And a storage pod, the idea of this is not from me. The template is from me, and I actually have a small, a medium, and a large. But this idea has been out there on the internet for quite a while. I just made a few changes to it, and then I figured out how to do it with our no-slip material. This is the small, this is the medium, and this is a large. So what do you do with storage pods? You can put hangers on it if you like. I'm going to show you a bunch of different varieties, but mainly it's to put stuff in. This is a medium size here, and you can see I've got a strap that isn't attached because this may be, it's floppy, it's lightweight, it doesn't have any stabilizer in it. This might be in your car that you put over if you've got a stick shift, or you've got the back of your headrest, or you've got someplace you can put this over. And if you wanted to add snaps or buttons or Velcro or whatever, or if you know the length you want, then you can simply stitch it inside. But what I want you to see is this one is collapsible. This can go in your suitcase, this can go wherever, but this guy is one option. It's the same size as this. This one has a little bit more stability, but not a whole lot to it even. I'm going to be showing you what to put in the middle. Let me grab this. This one is much more stable. You can see how this one stands on its own. This one's kind of floppy. Batting here, we've got what we call Bosal in our form. It's a nice little stiff kind of a foam, and it is easy to sew with. All of you that think, oh, I can't do it on my sewing machine, this stuff is great. So small, medium, large. You're going to put stuff in there. These are great gifts. These are great to put at the front of the house, on the back door, in the shower. The materials here, this stuff here, I'll show you some out of shower curtains that are really fun. You can actually put it in your shower, or you can put it in your laundry room for all the things that are going to be drip drying and all of the stuff that you don't want to kind of mess with. I have PUL, polyurethane laminate, that I'll show you a sample of a little bit later on. That's for diapers and anything smelly, cat food, dog food, things like that. If you've got dogs, you want to give them little treats for. So there's lots of different fabrics, but you can decide what you're going to stuff in these. All of your tools, all of your toys. It's a great gift container. So all of those things. So let's take a look. I'm going to get these guys out of the way. See how this is nice and stiff? That's the foam too. This is drop cloth inside of here. And I've got ribbon right here. This ribbon has just measuring tape. It's like a measuring tape, which is kind of cool too. So there's lots of cool things you can do with these. Let me get these out of the way, and we're going to take a look at the templates. Now I'm going to walk through a whole lot of stuff today, including sewing this up, of course, but then I'm going to give you more options. Options are where I like to play with this stuff, and that's what makes this so much fun. So small. There aren't any measurements on here other than small. So I've written up measurements for you, but basically you're going to look to see, and when I place this on my mat, I'm looking from here all the way up to here. And if I turn it over this way, then that gives me a little bit more. I'm just over 10 inches, not even 10 1/4. So 10 1/4 height, so 10 1/2 would be great for your amount of fabric, 11, 12, whatever it is you want. And then from here to here, this is where the fold of the fabric is going to be. You can see we're at about 7 1/4. So we need at least 15 inches of fabric in width, and we need at least 10 1/2 inches of fabric in height. If you'll notice, the templates have engravings on here. Storage pod, Winner Designs, place, unfold, top, and small. I went to this one, and I have a gold metallic pen. Silver actually works a little bit better. Martelli sells these. You may have some at home, but I've highlighted the things that I think are important. The fold, top. I wrote on here, and it's a little, this pen has been used quite a bit, so it's a little blurry, but 14 1/4 height. So 20 inches wide. When we look at this one here too, you can see This guy here, from here to here, it's almost 10 inches, so we need a piece of fabric that's at least 20 inches. And here we've got from here all the way up, it's at 14 inches, so we have really 15 inches that we need to have fabric-wise for that. So, or 14 and a half for that. So small, medium, and then my large. This is the big daddy. So this is the large storage pod template, and I wasn't sure I would love it, and I love it. I tell you, this one is so much fun. Christmas time, birthdays, holidays, whatever it is, make these guys here and stuff them full of all goodies, all kinds of goodies. Now, I don't have a clue who Oklahoma State is, so there's no affiliation there at all, but I love this standing up all by itself. This guy here has the NR foam inside. It's NR Form, F-O-R-M, but it is foam. This is home deck fabric, and you see how that's slouchy? I added handles here. I'm going to show you. I made a set of these, and they're great for backyard barbecues and all kinds of stuff to put your goodies in and hang them. So I'll show you that a little bit later. This size here, it's large. The medium is perfect for fat quarters, but on here, you're going to need yardage that you're working with. Now, not a full yard, but you can see I've got from here right up to here 20 and a half almost. So our height is 20 and a half. That's how the minimum you need for your fabric. And over here I've got a little bit more than 14. So with the fold over here, we need to double it. 29, so go to 30 inches for this. So this is the large. I tell you, if you're going to be making these, the medium and the large are the easiest to make because the stitches stitch up faster, and you can use all different kind of fabrics, and the turning is faster. I shouldn't say they stitch up faster because it's going to be more fabric, but it's easier to turn. Okay, I want to show you with the medium size how to make these, and I'm going to do the way that we've seen on the internet, and then I'm going to give you some suggestions of things that I like to do instead. Okay, so of course you need some other materials. You need fabric. I'm using 2 fat quarters here. I'm going to be using a Fusible. This is our woven Fusible that I like. I'm going to be using a batting. I've been talking about NR Form, so guess what I like? NR Form, but I also like a few others. Here is a Fusible, and the Fusible is not that heavy, so you may want to spray baste it. I'll show you that in a second, but this is a Fusible foam, and Zeke, I don't know if you can zoom in to see the texture, the height difference here. This guy here comes on a bolt. I'll pull that out in a minute. And this is a Fusible, stabilizer that's a fleece. All right, let's see over here. Oh, good. Okay, so this guy here, can you see how this is a little floppier and this is a little bit thicker? So the Fusible fleece, and then this is just a thinner kind of a batting that's fusible as well. You can get this from Joann's, you can get it from wherever online. And how do you know which one you're going to like? You're going to play with the options and see. We'll go through the fabrics. This is that Fusible foam that I talked about. This guy here, you can see it's much thicker. Don't worry about having problems with this on your machine. Your machine's going to love it. Now, I mentioned spray basting and I mentioned Fusible. So these guys here, this is a magic sheet, a giant sheet. I sell it on my website, and this thing protects my ironing board. It protects my mat. It protects my surface. It protects whatever it is I'm working on. So if I'm doing sprays, if I'm doing anything with heat, I'm not going to do it on my mat, but this guy here, you'll see me use that in a few minutes. So I love having that as well. I mentioned spray basting. They make spray basting in all different forms. This is just what I happen to have at home. And then an iron, and I love things like this. Philip made me this, and I love this. When would I use these? On the little small ones when you want to press those out, especially if you're going to be giving these as a gift or if you're going to be selling them too. So those are really nice as well. All right, so let's take a look at the template. The template design is pretty cool. Martelli came up with a way to figure out how to make a template that has this really cool feature. This is a cutout right inside of here. This area here, when my rotary cutter goes in, our Martelli rotary cutter is the one that I recommend, there's a cut here, and then there's a cut over here, and there's a cut here and a cut here. You'll see me do that in just a second. When I go to cut, that's going to allow me to cut almost all the way, maybe all the way, but there may be just a thread or two that doesn't get cut. So I want to have, I love the precision scissors, so I want to have the precision scissors nearby just in case I need it. Now you've got to make the decision, am I going to iron on or am I going to spray baste first? Anything on top of here before you cut. I've got an example. Can I find it real fast? No. I'll find it a little bit later on and then I'll show it to you. Yeah, seriously, can I find it? I just had it a little while ago. I'll show you that a little bit later on and you can see why I'm going to say don't iron or don't fuse on and then cut, especially when you're doing something heavy like this or even the fusible fleece. So if we're doing the iron-on, the stabilizer, the interfacing, I'm going to show you that where I am going to iron on and then I'm going to cut that. But I am going to go ahead and cut one just so you can see how it's done. Of course, you would iron your fabric. I ironed it before when I was at home, but traveling, it gets a little wonky. What do I want to do? I want to save as much of my fabric as possible because I may want to make straps from this. And you notice this says place on fold. I've just gone in and highlighted the fold. So we want our fabric on the fold. If I'm going to be using this stuff, this is a fusible, I would fuse this on before I do the cutting. I'm going to be with this one using this, the batting. So I'm not going to put that on when I go to cut. Cutting through 2 layers of any of the others just doesn't give you the accuracy. Cutting through 2 layers of this, no big deal. So we'll do that there. Or you want to line this up so this is right on the fold. I want to see my fabric so that it's right on that edge and then make sure I'm right there. I don't want to have waste here. I don't want to have waste here. And over here you can see how I have just a little bit and I'm okay with that. I'm going to scoot this up a little bit because again I can make straps out of all of those leftover pieces. When I get to where I think we're good, then we're going to go ahead and grab the rotary cutter. And I'm going to use the 45mm on most every project that I do. Now you guys that know Martelli's no slip material, you know how good this stuff is. See how that moves? It's that no slip material, this stuff on the back that grabs my fabric. Watch this mess. And you can see how it grabs that. It's going to move that fabric because of that no slip material on the back. So wherever it is that I want to turn this and cut. I'm using our rotary cutter and I'm cutting from the hip. Shoot from the hip, cut from the hip, not in front of you because of the no slip material. I'm going to turn this way and I want to make sure I cut just past the edge here. Now this is where I'm going to take my time and look where my hand is. My hand is here. It's not here. If you have your hand here and you go to hit and you have not been careful with this, you're going to slice your finger open. And I don't want to hear any horror stories. So right here, and I'm going to cut, and I don't know if you can see. Zeke, can you zoom in and show that rotary cutter right inside of that cut? I'm going to bring that back out and you can see that cut. Now I'm going to turn it this way and I'm going to do the same thing. You can see my hand is here and it's not in the way here. We're going to cut. And then I'm going to turn again and I'm going to cut. Again, I'm trying not to waste any of that excess fabric because I might want to take advantage of that somewhere else. All right, so I don't know if you could see when I moved it, all of this fabric fell away. Because of those cuts there and the cuts there, I didn't have to go back with the scissors and snip. If you have a thread or two, especially on this medium size, make sure you're going straight forward. Don't hit down like that. Straight forward will get you through and it'll cut off most of that excess fabric. Okay, so we've got one cut. We're going to use this one with the batting. So I want to keep that guy and I'm going to look at my batting. And what do I need to do? You can cut here, but I recommend not. What I recommend you do is instead of cutting out exactly, we're going to cut a little bit larger because we're going to spray baste this on. So I'm basically only going to be cutting off some of the height just because I don't want to waste. All right, so I've got my fabric, my batting folded right here. I've got it folded here and I'm just basically going to chop, whoops, and I have my rotary cutter closed, so we're good. I'm going to chop that off because I don't want to spray baste any more than I have to. So we're going to put that aside. Now we're going to take this guy here. This guy, we're going to grab our fusible. And you have to decide, am I going to use all of this fabric later on for fusing for something else? Or do I not want to waste all of this? Plus, I have a direction. I'm looking at it in the right direction. You guys are looking at it upside down. So I want to make sure when I put this on here that if I'm using a directional fabric, Remember how this says top? So I want this to go directionally. So what do I want to do? Again, I'm not going to waste all of the fabric, but I also don't want to do anything here yet. When we get to the ironing board, then we'll go ahead. But I'm going to cut here so you can see I've got enough fabric that I'm going to cut off. And when I go over to here, I'm not going to worry about any of that because we're going to fuse that on. So we're going to come to this way. And I'm basically going to be looking at my height here, and right about here where that pink pineapple part is, I'm going to fold that in half. And none of this is necessary. This is just because I like to save my fabric. I don't want to waste all my fabric. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to use the template and just do this and use it as my guide. So we're going to fuse these two together. So I'm just slicing that off. We're going to head over to the ironing board. We've got a great ironing wool mat, and we're going to press these guys here. And I'm going to grab my basting spray too. Whoops. And actually, we're going to do our basting over there because Zeke has a nice little board for me. Okay, so what do we want to do? I'm going to fuse these two together. What do I need to get? Remember I said this is fusible. We do not want to do any damage to our pressing mat, this wonderful wool mat that we have here. So I'm going to go grab my fusible sheet that's here. Thank you, Zeke. It's so nice to work in this studio, but I don't normally work in this studio. So it's one of those things I kind of have to get used to. All right, so I don't know if this iron turns off automatically. I turned it on earlier, but notice what I'm doing. I'm using my pressing sheet, and that pressing sheet, because this is the fusible side, it's the side that's grainy, that's rough, it's facing up. I don't want it to go down, and what that allows me to do is fuse this, and if it does have any excess, it's going to go on here, not on here. And I think my iron got turned off, so it's not very hot. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a minute and see if it'll kind of come back on. And what we want to do is just fuse this. Because this is lightweight, I can fuse this and it's not an issue. All right, let's give a little bit more. Let's see how this is going over here. That's why that spray basting might come in handy for you guys. If we can't get the iron to heat up in a minute, I'll go ahead and spray baste this on too. So the other thing you could do is you could actually cut these out and then stitch them, just basically a basting stitch. All right, so we'll see if this is going to be heating up at all. And you know, there are different fusibles that work different ways. Some of them you press down, like I'm doing now, rather than pressing across. Let's see if that makes any difference. G and Sherry, you guys that watch Martelli know real life sewing, y'all. This is the kind of stuff that when you're using other materials that aren't yours, that's like, oh, I should have done X, Y, Z. So we'll see how this works, and if this doesn't work, again, I'll spray baste this too. All right, let's see how we do. Okay, this is starting to stick. Now, what I want y'all to see is this is starting to stick. So what I don't want to do is have that fusible stuck on here. If you get any fusible stuck on there, this guy here, it's a mat scrubber, but it also scrubs off all that junk. The other thing, too, to tell you about this, at home I have kitty cats, and here we've been using this a lot, so watch. I don't know if y'all can see, but this stuff right here, all of this wool that's at the top that started to get linty, any threads that you have, for mine, it's all kitty cat hair that would be coming up. It would be here and it would be here. So if you have this for your mat, well, now you need it for your wool mat too. So this guy is really handy too. Okay, so we're going to go back over to the cutting table. We're going to see how this turned out. And if we have to use the basting spray, then we'll do that. I'm going to get these out of the way for a minute. All right, so what we want to do is cut this guy. This looks like it's fused pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And what do we want to do? We're going to, again, fold in half where we're not wasting all that excess fabric. And I'm looking to see right about here, I've got fusible that ends here. It's a little bit hard with the white on white, so this wasn't cut straight. So we're going to do this. Remember the directions of the pineapple I care about? So this is the top, so my pineapples are going this way. We're going to line that up, and what do? We're going to go ahead and cut. And it doesn't matter where you start. Where your fingers are make all the difference too, though, so don't get those fingers in the way. See how that guy was just cut off? So we're going to go ahead and cut that off. And all of this fabric that's here has that iron-on fusible that's the woven fusible. We have a non-woven. I like the woven for these. Okay, so we've got one of these done here. And I don't know if you can see, this right here was torn and it didn't fuse on there. You could actually take a piece of this and stick it right on there if you want to, a piece that wasn't fused, and stick it right on there and press. I'm going to leave that. We'll pretend that didn't happen. Now what we want to do is do our basting. So I'm going to grab my batting. I'm going to grab this guy, and Zeke gave me this wonderful big sheet. So I recommend you do this outside or you do this in a box. You don't want to do this on your cutting mat, on your ironing surface. You don't want to do this anywhere where you have stuff that you care about, because this basting spray is really, really sticky, and I want it to stick to this and not to everything else. So we're going to spray baste, and we're going to stick our fabric. See, even those fumes are going all over. We don't want those fumes spreading anywhere. If you all have a box, I use one of my shipping boxes that is just kind of beat up and ugly, and it works just fine. Do you see how sticky this is? Even my fingers, it's sticking to. All right, once we get this kind of laid out nicely, then we're going to use the template to help us out. The reason why I'm doing this second and not first is, you'll see. All right, I think we're pretty good there. When I fold this over, these two layers are pretty thick. And what happens with that is it makes it harder. I'll find that sample a little bit later on, and I'll show you how it doesn't cut exactly as smooth. Now, if you have the 60mm rotary cutter, no big deal. You can do that with the 60mm. Okay, what have I done? I put the template on one side. We're going to cut this out, and then we're going to flip it over, and we're going to cut the other side. Again, if you have the 60mm, then you could skip this step completely. I'm going to be cutting, and I'm going to be cutting all these little pieces here, and then in a second we're going to flip it over and go to the other side. And this basting spray is big time sticky, so we want to make sure, again, just to keep that work surface nice and clean. And if this doesn't line up exactly, see right here I have a little bit, no big deal, that's my seam allowance. All right, what are we going to do over here? We're going to put it this way, and now we're going to be treating this as if it was an acrylic template, and you'll see that an acrylic template is harder to work with because the black side doesn't have the no-slip material, but it still is going to be a good enough guide for me to use this. So if you do another fusible, the lighter weight, this guy here, instead of doing what I'm doing, you could put this on your fabric first, fuse that on there, and then not have to do this step that I'm doing. What I'm going to do is turn this, and I'm going to go carefully around here. And when we get over to our fabric, I'm going to make sure that kind of joins up, and then we'll cut that off. Okay, so we've got that part. We're going to come back down here, and we're going to make sure to realign everything. And I need to get a little bit here too, so we're going to go back and cut that. We're going to come up here. Do you see the hassle of this? And this is what I've seen most people doing, not with this template, but I've seen most people using batting. And I like batting, but I like batting for quilts. I don't really need batting for this, and I'm not so crazy about batting for this project. So I'll show you some finished samples, and we'll go through all those different materials too. All right, so you notice right here, this is off and that is off. I'm not sure if I cut those, so we're going to go back and place this on. Notice I have the template in the opposite direction. It doesn't matter because these pieces are exactly the same. We're not cutting up here. We're cutting down at the bottom. So when I go to cut and trim that off, we're going to be good to go. All right, so this guy is ready. I'm going to grab that other piece, and we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to make a storage pod. Okay, so we're going to grab these two. So I'll see you at the sewing machine. All right, you can use whatever seam allowance you like. Totally up to you. We've got, I don't even know what foot is on here. I'm going to use the foot that was on here before. And what you want to think about, and I'll show you in the projects, is whichever piece is going to be your lining, you're probably going to use a bigger seam allowance for that. So I like this for the outside and this for the inside. I just said you're probably going to use a bigger seam allowance, but I have batting and here I just have a fusible. So I'm going to use about the same seam allowance for these two, and then we'll test it out and figure out which one works best as we start to sew. All right, so I've got maybe a scant 1/4 inch that I'm using. And you would want to back stitch. Once you've made a couple of these and you know what your seam allowance is going to be, then you would want to back stitch, but because it's your first time around, play with that seam allowance, and then you can go back and back stitch for that first one. After the others, then go ahead and do that back stitching where you start and where you finish. And if you've got a little bit of a bump, that's where a stiletto works really well. You can kind of push that. It's one of the reasons why I don't like batting as well as the fusible foam. The foam doesn't tend to bunch up at the sewing machine. You would think because it's so much thicker that it would bunch up. I have scissors over here I'm going to grab. And then the other thing that you're going to probably want are these clips. The Wonder type clips that we sell are wonderful. So I'm going to grab those two, and what we're going to do now is we're going to piece together. See how I have extra batting there? That batting just didn't stick. That foot kind of grabbed, so your batting sometimes doesn't lay because we haven't done any quilting to this. You can do quilting if you want. I've got one of the samples that my friend Shirley made, and she quilted it. I'll show you how she did that a little bit later on. But because we haven't done any quilting, your batting might actually separate, even though we did use a spray basting. All right, so let's go back and see what I did. I've got my seam allowance. Again, it's a little bit less than 1/4 inch, maybe 1/4 inch. So this I've just sewn up is going to be the bottom. And you can see here, zoom out just a little bit so they can see down. Okay, there you can see there's the top and there's the bottom. This is the seam allowance down at the bottom. And now we want to make a box pleat and another box pleat. So we're going to look to see that this is basically in the center. I've got the template set up so that you're going to see a little bit of a peak here, a little bit of a peak here. It's just a kind of a dip. I don't care if this lines up a little crooked. Can you see how this right here, there's a little bit of green showing there and a little bit there? That's for my seam allowance. I don't care because that's my box pleat and it's not going to show. I only have one seam on this side. This side I have two, so we'll go in opposite directions there. But on this one, I'm going to have that open a little bit. We'll put our foot down, and as I start to stitch, and I'm actually going to move my needle over just a little bit. All right, we'll put that foot down. As I start to stitch, this, we would, again, on a real project that you know is good to go and you're not going to make any changes to, you would back stitch. Now right about there, I'm going to lift up my foot and bring it down, get that fabric down flat. A stiletto would work wonders here. All right, so we're going to finish off that side. We're going to go to the next side too. And when I do this, I've got those two seams. So this is my box pleat that I just created there. So we've got two seams now. We want to line those up in the center. If you want to grab those clips and use the clips, go for it. Because I've done so many of these, I'm kind of loosey-goosey, and I know that the seam allowance for me doesn't make all that much difference as far as everything being absolutely perfect. These projects that I like to do tend to not be perfectionistic projects, and if you are a perfectionist, let it go. If you need to have a glass of wine beforehand just to kind of loosen up a little bit, or if you need to get out of the mold or break out of the mold that you're in, then these would be great to do too. I'm going to hold this fabric forward, and I have this fabric underneath going backwards this way towards me. So you decide which way you like to do this. Again, if you want to do pins for this, terrific. I'm going to right about now, instead of grabbing a seam allowance, lift the foot, and I'm just scooting that with these precision scissors a little bit underneath. And again, my seam allowance doesn't have to be exactly perfect. You know, if you're making these and you're selling these for big bucks, okay, that's a different story. But I'm making these and giving these away, and you get the idea. There is the inside, and I've got a box pleat on the back side over here, and I've got a box pleat on the front. We're going to do basically the same thing with this. Now, here's the deal. Where do we leave the opening for turning this? Because we've got to sew these together. I don't want to put a binding on. I will show you one that's made for a binding. So I can do in my lining, if I want to, an opening. Now my lining is batting, so I'm going to choose not to do it here. If I was going to have the opening, I would probably right here, see this is the box pleat down at the bottom, I would probably right here to right about here. Definitely backstitch when you get there and leave the opening. If I didn't have batting, but I have batting on this one. So I'm going to, believe it or not, have the opening on the outside. Why? Because I just have this fusible. So it's easier for me to turn, and then you can use glues, you can use a hand needle, you can stitch it at the sewing machine. There's a peel off tape that you can use. And remember this piece right here, this is the piece that when I was cutting, I had a piece that had already been cut. So what I'm going to do there is just top stitch along there so it doesn't go flying. All right. So what I did was I stitched this piece down just a little bit. You can see right here it was cut. Now this is still flopping down. I could go back to the iron and press that down. I have an iron over here. Let me go ahead and press that and see if it actually will. Yep, perfect. All right, I'll show you what I just did. By the way, if you don't have Martelli's wool pressing mat right next to your sewing machine, get one and put it right next to your sewing machine. That or our turntable with the wool mat too. You can see I pressed this down, pressed that down, and that's not flopping back anymore. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to sew the side seams. We're going to sew the bottom seam, and we're going to sew our box pleats. But remember, we're going to leave the opening here. So I'm going to take a couple stitches. When I get to right about here, I'm going to go ahead and back stitch. I'm going to lift up my presser foot, bring my needle up, and I'm just going to pull this a little bit, and I'm going to put my needle down. I'm going to back stitch right here. And at the top, I'm going to go ahead and back stitch here. Now I'm going to show you when we're dealing with really different fabrics for the outside and the inside, that what I just did here, we may change. So when we're working with fabrics that are really, really heavy, vinyls and leathers and pleathers and other materials that are really, really different, you know, then I'm going to do something a little bit different. Okay, we want to sew the bottom. Okay, we're going to stitch here. And again, do your starting and stopping back stitching there. All right, we're going to pop that up and we're going to do our box pleat. I'm going to do the side that doesn't have but just one seam. And what I want to do is, again, make sure that that seam right here is kind of in the center. So I'm looking, and you can see there's a little bit of a cut and a little bit of a cut. Let me turn it to this side, and maybe you'll see it a little bit better. Can you see how there's a little bit of a snip there and a little bit of a snip there? That's the template letting you know where those corners are and where you want that box pleat to be. And again, back stitch your stitches. So again, when we're working with different fabrics, the back stitching may be something I do later. I'll walk you through that a little bit more when we work on some other projects. I want to line up my seams here. And again, I'm going to put, instead of opening my seams, I'm going to have one seam going one way and another seam going the opposite way. So we'll go ahead and put that foot down. And I've got the ones on the bottom coming towards me and the ones on the top. I'm going to lift up a little bit just to make sure that they don't get flopped backwards. All right, it's time to test it out and see how this fits. All right, so what we're going to do is I want to show you here. Notice what I've done is I've turned the one, this guy here that has the batting out. So I've got this fabric on the outside, and this one I've got the fabric on the inside. We're going to stick inside of here. Remember, this is our opening right here. I like that opening there. So if I do need to make any changes, I'll know if I need to make that a little bit bigger. I want to push those box pleats into each other and feel that it feels pretty good. I want to feel where my center is, and I want to feel where my center of my back is. So when we get to the back, that's the best place for you to kind of start that back area. I'm going to put a clip here. Now you've got a decision. Do you want straps? Do you not want straps? The lesser of the batting of the fusible, the less stiff that you have, the more you want to have straps. Something that's really stiff that can stand on its own, you may not need straps. So it's up to you. Do you want to do a snap? Do you want to do buttons? Do you want to do Velcro? You decide. I'm going to put a couple clips here just to hold my seams together. And then I want to play with this, and I'm going to start at my center. I can always adjust the seam allowance here. If you guys have made these and you found when you got to here, especially when you have batting on the outside or something heavier here, this will be too big. So you can actually, when you're all finished clipping, you can actually go to this and increase that stitch seam allowance. Let me show you right here. Increase that stitch allowance right here, that seam allowance there. But because I have batting on the inside, it's kind of a twist on this. I like the idea of having batting on the inside. It doesn't make it as wimpy. Have you all seen the ones or made the ones where inside they're just a little bit like, I don't know, like pants that are too big, pants that haven't been ironed, you know, pants that don't fit you. You know, it just looks not as good. All right, so I'm lining up and I'm clipping, clipping, clipping. Now, if you have a sewing machine where you can take the free arm off, terrific. But Lisa has taught me, and by watching some other videos and having to work on this machine a couple times, you can't always take your arm off of your sewing machine. So I want to show you how you can do that. I've clipped and clipped and clipped. You can be sewing this way. The problem is this is going to hit all up here. So you can do this too. You can turn it inside out. When you turn it inside out, you'll find one way works a little bit better. All right, because all of this is lined up pretty well and I don't need to make any adjustments to my seam allowance, I'm going to go ahead and start on the back, but I'm going to start probably right about here. Why? I'm going to leave that opening so that once I turn it, I can say, do I want to have straps or do I not want to have straps? Once we turn it right sides out, we'll be able to look at it. Now, I would have made the decision really beforehand to add the straps, but I want you guys to see kind of the thought process. Okay, so I am working where this fabric is here and this is here, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that needle down. And maybe not. Oh, I've got that clip in the way, so it's probably not letting me for that. Okay, so same seam allowance you used earlier is what we're going to be using here. And because I know that I'm deciding on the straps, I'm going to go ahead and back stitch there for sure. And I know that everything is fitting well too, so I could, if I'm going to do the same scenario the next time I make one, back stitch those stitches for sure, because we don't want, when this is full of all kinds of goodies that you've given somebody, especially shower gels or makeup or anything heavy, we don't want that little storage pod that you've created that everybody's oohing and ahhing over, we don't want it falling apart. All right, so you notice here, I'm just kind of manipulating this fabric and turning it, removing those clips as I go. We've got a little bit of a curve here. You don't really need to lift your presser foot, especially with the batting that we have and the Fusible stabilizer that we have. But if you're working with something heavier, the Insulbrite, the Fusible foam, any of those things, you may need to lift up that foot and pivot just a little bit. Take your time here. There's no rush. We're going to go around. It really comes out pretty quick and pretty easy. When you get good at these, you'll be able to do assembly line cutting where you cut, sew. All of that super fast and easy. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and back stitch here because again, if you're going to add straps, I've left room for the straps. But I want to show you though, pretend that is right here, that is closed, because I want to show you how we would turn it. We're basically going to be going to look for where that opening is. So I'm going to pull through, and this is the birthing of the baby. If you make the hole really big, then it's easier to do, but that's more that you have to work with. If you make the hole smaller, then it's tougher to do. Plus, batting is a whole lot easier. This woven Fusible is a whole lot easier for me to manipulate than one of the Fusible foams or Insulbrite or Timtex or Peltex. I'm going to show you a Timtex Peltex project, and you're not even going to want to turn it right sides out like I've done. Okay, remember this pink is the outside, so I'm going to pull this. See how my hand is right inside of here? I'm going to pull this inside. And again, if you knew what you were going to do for the straps, then you wouldn't have this opening here. But I want to show you the difference once we look at this to see straps or no straps. And then we're going to start talking about options because there are lots and lots of options. What are we doing? We're finagling. What are we going to be doing? We're going to be pressing. We're going to be pulling. We're going to be pushing, finagling all of this. All right, so I'm just giving this. I want to make sure when I like to top stitch, but it's an if, when I top stitch that those seams are truly open. That will make a big difference on whether you've got a nice looking consistent storage pod. You've got a template that gives you the consistency. So it's the pressing and it's the turning the right sides to do that. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've got. We can see when I smooth that out, this is my storage pod. Okay, so again, this is open right here. This, when I stand it up, it kind of stands on its own. So maybe I don't need straps. What am I going to do with this? Is this going to have like a backyard barbecue luau kind of a vibe where I'm going to give somebody a Virgin Mary pina colada or whatever and put in, a cool cup and a few other things in there? Whatever it is going to be, that's how you'll decide if you want to add the strap or not. I'm going to say with this one, I don't need a strap, but let's go back to the cutting table and I want to show you some options for straps. All right, so for your straps, remember we had excess fabric. This has the pineapple, so I would really want to use something like this for my straps. Martelli makes a 2x12 ruler. We've got all kinds of rulers. I have a 2x14 ruler. We basically want to think about what width you want. And by the way, I'm just giving this a good little press inside with my hands. You really would go to the ironing board, but because we're going to turn this back inside out again and stitch this up, I'm not going to take the time yet. But I'm going to go ahead and cut up this. Do I have the 2x12 ruler with me? No. So I'm going to go ahead and use my template as my guide, and I'm going to use my mat. So we'll put this here. I'm going to go ahead and I've got 1, 2. If you want to do 2.5, that works as well as 2. So we're starting at the 9, and I can do 9 to 11.5. I'm looking at the mat, and I'm using my mat as my guide for me to cut. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this, and what that's going to do is give me one strap. Now, what do we want to do for our strap? That's where you're going to come back and add some leftover Fusible in here. Go ahead and iron that on, and then you would fold in, you would fold in, you would fold in, and that Fusible is just going to give you a little bit more substance. That's just going to look better. It's going to feel better. And when you do that, we're going to be tucking that inside of here. So that guy there, we're going to pull back out. Don't y'all love all these options that I give you? I give you too many options, I know, but I want you to be able to pick and choose what it is you do with these. So if we wanted to add a strap, that's one option. I actually like, and I don't think I have any of them. I had them for me to bring earlier, but I actually like all the webbing and all of the straps that are ready-made because I think they just add a nice change of pace instead of your fabric. So it's a nice change of pace. But if you were going to do that, let's pretend that this is our strap, then we would go ahead and decide what length we want. So we're going to go ahead and cut this off. I really wanted to be able to show you all that web. Now we're going to grab a couple of our clips, and we're going to clip this inside. So you can see that opening that I have here. I've got a new tool that I'm going to be showing you about in a little bit later in another video. And that tool is wonderful for doing placement that I'm doing right here. So from here to here, you decide how far out you want it to be. I'm right at the 4.5, so if I want it to be at the 9 and have it at the center, you can see this doesn't even match. But imagine this is a nice finished strap. So what do I do here? I put this in. I'm going to clip on one side first. Now, we don't have to worry about right sides, wrong sides. What we do have to worry about is twisting on a real strap, not on this guy. We're going to put this inside. Notice how I had that nice and flat. So this would go inside here. And then we're going to look at 1 inch. So from here to here, right about the center of that, we would place that clip here as well. Once we get that position where we want, and when you see this other set of rulers that I have, these new templates, you're going to flip over how versatile they'll be. Okay, we want to tuck that inside. Once we get that inside, then we're going to come back and reposition that clip. So we get all 3 of those layers. Reposition that clip and we'll get all 3 of those layers. And then we would stitch that down. I'm not adding a strap. So I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch this closed, and then we'll finish this guy up. So I want to show you a bunch of other projects and a bunch of other options because I like batting, but I already mentioned, you all know, I don't love batting for this project. If you are going to do batting, then a more stiff fusible, and they make stiffer fusible too, so I use the woven on this. And by the way, I could feel right now that these are not lined up, and that's just me not taking the time. So take the time to make sure that those are lined up. And when I'm done there, again, we can back stitch a little bit. I'm going to cut that thread and let's flip it through. All right, so remember that we've got the opening on the outside because that's the one that is not as lofty. I don't have to worry as much about it falling apart. If I were pulling everything through with the batting, you know, those edges would get pretty messy and it wouldn't be as nice and as easy for me to close that opening either. So this is where glue works, this is where a hand needle works, this is where the sewing machine works, this is where you can use the peel-off tape. I have permanent tape that I sell on my website, which I love. It is really cool, but you cannot sew on permanent tape. So whatever it is you're doing, you need to be thinking, do I need a needle on there too? Remember, we're going to take the time to just finagle all of this before we do any top stitching. So I'm going to take just a second here. At home, I would actually take more time. I found the little details like this do make a difference. When you rub back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and we want to top stitch all of this. Again, you decide on the top stitching. With the batting, I would want to top stitch. I love having my little iron right here, and I know you guys can't see. Let me put this back up. This is our wool pressing mat, and I've got my little portable iron here. And you would take the time to iron all of that. So this guy here, again, I would just kind of finger this and top stitch once everything is nice and consistent and I've pressed out really well. So let's pretend that all of that is done. I'd go back to the sewing machine and I would top stitch this. I know you guys like to see all the steps, but I've got a bunch of other things I want to show you. So again, you can start right down here. I like to start on the right side because I want that, whatever thread you're using, by the way, this, whichever it is that you want, if you want white here and you want pink here, if you're doing pink on the green, you need to sew consistently. So make sure you're consistent in whatever it is. What I really want to show you though is this back side. Okay, we're going to pop that out just like I did a little while ago, pushing those corners, and then let's take a look at this seam. So this is my opening. I want one side that lays flat, and then this other side with my fingernails, I'm just going to give that a good fold. And when I give that a good fold with my fingernails, can you see how already it looks closed? So you can use a fabric glue, you can use the permanent peel-off tape, you can use whatever it is. You could at the sewing machine stitch these. I don't want to stitch these at the sewing machine. I just don't think it looks good. If you wanted to do a hand needle, but what I do on mine, again, is I just give that a finger press with my fingernail. I have a stiletto that Philip made me, the wooden ones. If you guys have seen them, that it would be perfect for this too. What I want to do there is just finger press that and then stick my little bit of glue underneath there or that peel off tape. And what that gives me is a nice finish on there. Okay, pretend that this is really pretty and that we pressed it and it looks great. So we're done with the storage pod. Congratulations, don't you feel good? See how easy that's gonna be? Okay, so let's talk options. Because again, I've told you some things that I like better than others. So let's look at some options that are here. I wanna show you all some options because this is where you can really start to get creative. And I think this is the kind of stuff that I haven't seen out on the internet that much. So I want to make sure that you all are good for, you know, all these different options. Okay, remember this is the Bozal Fusible. This is the foam in our form, F-O-R-M, but it's foam. So this guy here, that makes this. No handles, so I don't need handles on there. So we're good to go. This right here, this is, again, that Fusible, this stuff here. So this also nice and straight, but you see the little this little tie that is done there, nice and short. If you've got hooks somewhere and you want to hook that right near the front door, the back door, wherever it is, all those goodies can go in there, all the important things that you need to, take to work every single day. You can put your purse, your keys, your glasses, whatever, in the big one if you need it. So this strap can be shorter or longer. This is nothing. What I mean by that is there is no fusible in here. There is no foam. There is no batting. There's nothing. This is home deck material. This flops down. See how floppy that is? But there's two straps here. Again, when you stick this full of all kinds of goodies, you can have this hanging in your backyard off of your fence and have all your stuff in here. Beach towels, those kinds of things, silverware, all of the condiments, napkins in here. These three guys, small, medium, and large. And you can see this strap, this is the webbing I like to use. This you can buy in bulk. You can get it online by, not the yard, but like in 10-yard increments or whatever. It's a long, big piece. But do you see that little strap that's there? And again, there's nothing in here at all, but that guy actually does stand up. So this guy is the small, this is the medium, and notice what I did here? I widened the straps. So all of these are sewn in. They do not have to be sewn in. Buttons, snaps, Velcro, whatever it is, works really well. So small, medium, and large. Home deck fabrics that you can get on sale at great prices. These are so much fun to play with. So I love that. Okay, so let's see. PUL, polyurethane laminate. I love PUL for all of those things, food and diapers and anything that might be stinky, dog food, those kinds of things. What is PUL? Polyurethane laminate. It looks like fabric on the front side, but on the back side, you can see how slick this is. This guy here is shiny. Wipeable, washable, breathable. If you know laminated fabric and oilcloth, those kinds of things, they're wipeable, washable, but not breathable. This, do you see how this kind of moves here? But not so much. It kind of stays. But this side, when I turn it here, do you see how that's all over the place? So if you go to cut with this, you do not want to cut here. Do you see how whatever you cut here is not going to be the same when you get over here? So we're going to turn this way, and even here, you want to take your time when you go to cut and just be very, very careful. Let me show you here. Notice what I did. I made it a little bit wider. Why? Because this, can you see here? I barely have enough here. If I make this, let's put it back on that fold. Do you see? I still don't have enough fabric. So this piece that I have barely enough left over, I want to show you something cool that we're going to do out of this. This is the excess. Can you see how this was? That was from this one here. This was this piece over here, and this was this piece over here. Okay, so I'm going to show you a special project you can do with that, but do you see how that lets me grab? So we want to have the PUL outside on the outside, or on the inside, touching the PUL outside. This guy here, this will grab, this stuff will grab here, but when it's here, it's going to slide all over the place. Okay, PUL. I have a layer of PUL, I have a layer of PUL, and I also added a little bit of this. Why? It gives it a little bit more substance. So whether this is going to hold wet bathing suits, whether this is going to hold dog food, whether this is going to hold diapers, whether this is going to hold food, this guy here, wipeable, washable, breathable, you can throw this in the washer and dryer, and if you happen to leave any of that stuff in by accident, it's not going to grow all over the back side very quickly like it would if you used an oilcloth or laminated fabric. So this, if you wanted this to be really stiff and really stable, the Fusible, here's the deal. I can't fuse. Not on this stuff. If you use Fusible with this and you iron it on, this stuff is going to all melt up. It's going to make a big mess. Remember that sheet that I had, the giant sheet? It's called the giant sheet or the amazing sheet. So that sheet on top, very lightly you can press. Very lightly you can press out the wrinkles. So when you work with PUL, you've got to work a little bit differently. Also, when you stitch, because it is a material like a laminated material, when you stitch, back stitching doesn't do you a whole lot of good. So when you back stitch, I don't know if Zeke, you can come in on my fingernail here. We're going to, on the edge here, when I get down to here, instead of back stitching like this, straight up and down, I'm going to back stitch going that way and going that way. Just a little bit inside, a little bit inside. So if it does start to rip, I've got additional stitches, but don't backstitch right on top of itself because that's just going to weaken this and ruin it. So this stuff, pop out those corners, give it some stability. Top stitching on here would be nice, but this is a pain to work with if you're using your regular foot. When you're sewing with this, you're better to work, if you've got batting or anything else, you're better to sew on this side. Let's do it this way. On this side than on this side. Your foot's going to love this. Your foot's going to love this. So a Teflon foot, if you have one, if you don't have a Teflon foot, they make a roller foot. You can also put a piece of tape, masking tape, just cut out the opening of your foot. You can put tissue paper on the bottom of your sewing machine, but I find it's really underneath the foot that this stuff has a hard time with. So again, anytime you can sew on something else, sew on this side rather than on this side, it will help. And then changing out that foot for a Teflon foot will make all the difference. But these are really practical gifts too. If you make one of these, make sure you give them a little handout that tells them about PUL. Do not put an iron to this because you'll be in big time trouble. Okay, let's see, a few others that I want to show you. Remember the shower curtain concept? This is a shower curtain outside, and then this is outdoor fabric. This on the back side would be shiny on the back side. Again, it has a little bit more stability than this one. This is a shower curtain, and then real thin material that is drip dry kind of stuff. This is the one that I didn't attach the strap because you can do snaps. You could do a snap, a snap, a snap, and you decide where you want it to be. One snap here, and then you decide how long you want that to be. Same thing with buttons if you want to do buttonholes. I like snaps better than buttonholes. You can do Velcro as well. So shower curtain material is a whole lot of fun. And shower curtains, when you go shopping around Tuesday morning, those kinds of places, they have great cool fabrics with shower curtain stuff that you can find on sale, really reduced prices, and they make fun bags. So I think that's a fun one to do too. Okay, so I love buying those bags that are the shopping bags. And you can you hear that? I took a shopping bag, and I do have this material. This is what's left over from the shopping bag. This was from Marshall's. So these guys here are a lot of fun to play with too. Now what I ended up doing, because I didn't have anything that matched inside from all of my other fabrics, I used a pleather, kind of a vinyl type of material. You can do whatever it is you want. Again, you decide, is this going to hold food? If it's going to hold food or something sticky or dirty or whatever, then you want it to be a wipeable material that you can wipe off. And remember what we're going to do too? Again, this area right here is where I left this open and I just glued it shut so you can't even see where that was glued down. So inside of here, it's like that pleather leather material. And you can see it stands up on its own. Top stitching on here would be really nice. Give this not a press so much, but just give this a nice little tweak. Pull, pull, pull. Make sure that that's nice and finished. And when you go to top stitch, you're going to increase your stitch length so that it looks really pretty and it doesn't poke holes, because this is plastic. But isn't that cute? My sister is a Schnauzer fanatic, so I made her a bunch of these. And now she's selling her house, so she didn't get anything for her birthday because I didn't want to junk up her house with extra stuff. So Laura, if you're watching, that's one of your gifts that I made for you. Okay, let me show you a couple others. And then we're going to do a little twist on this too. Okay, so this guy here, a piece of cotton fabric, a piece of cotton fabric. Inside of here, that iron-on, this guy here, this fusible, the woven fusible, that's all I have to this. But do you see how that stands up on its own too? And this is actually a shoe tie right here, this pink. But look how cute. For the cat lover, you can put all the cat goodies in there, a couple cat toys. That would make a really nice gift. If you have kitties that are always stealing the toys and hiding them, then you can put all the toys in here so that you've got them ready to go. So those are fun to do too as well. Drop cloth, I already mentioned that before. And then this is that ribbon that looks like it's a tape measure, which is fun. So these are always fun. Drop cloths, they're more masculine, a little bit more manly. So Shirley did this one out of the cotton batting, and that's just like the one that I did today, basically. But she went in and did quilting. If you look, you can see in red, I love that she chose red rather than black. We have stitches that go up and down. and up and around. So she's basically just following the shape of the template. But the top stitching there gives it a little bit more substance so that it'll hold up a little bit better. But take a look at this one. Fusible foam, batting. This guy here, batting plus the one layer of this. I like the foam, that's kind of my deal, so just to give you an idea. I mentioned Timtex Peltex. Timtex Peltex, this on the outside is Timtex Peltex right inside of here. This is a quilted material that you can purchase. I put this inside because you cannot turn Timtex Peltex out to the right side. So what do? You find a binding that you like, and you can do your strap out of the binding and then put a binding along here. What I recommend is using some kind of a peel-off tape to stick that on, because when you start to sew, again, if you've got a sewing machine where you can't take off the arm, you're going to be fighting with this, and I don't want that affecting your stitches. So using a peel-off tape, this is the kind you can sew through, and you can put a binding around the edge. You can also just leave it as is and do a decorative stitch, or you can do a serged edge on there as well. So that's another project. I just recommend, instead of the Timtex Peltex, that you use the fusible foam. This guy here, fusible foam, this will hold the coffee cup, and it holds it nice and stiff and straight. This is also fusible foam. You can see this was a napkin inside, and this was just cotton fabric. So this gives a little bit more substance even. Again, you've got a strap that you can choose where you want to put that, buttons, a Velcro, whatever it is. So decide if you want to have a strap and put snaps on for somebody to, if you're giving these away, then you can make the strap longer and let them pick. Put the snap here, and then you're going to put a snap, a snap, a snap, a snap, a snap, maybe every inch or so. That way they can snap wherever it is. On the back of your car, your headrest in your car, you know, that's a nice option for you too. So those guys there. Okay, one more. I think that's another foam. The foam is in there as well. And now I want to break open a couple and show you some of our options, because this is one of those things that just helps you to kind of play with. Remember when I said go ahead and take your time and place your fabric, your straps, if you decide you want the straps or not. So this is the lighter weight of the fleece. It's not the heavier fleece. This is the lighter weight of the fleece too. I want you to see how this looks versus the batting, and we'll look at a couple different sizes and options for you as well. So when I go place this inside of here, line up those seams, and just kind of look to see. I haven't gotten everything lined up, but do you like the look? Do you like the stability that that has? So this fusible fleece and fusible fleece versus, I know the fabrics are the same and you probably wouldn't do that, but this is batting. And this I've just done some random quilting on here. So I'm going to put this inside, and I want you to see why I'm not as crazy about batting. Because this, as soon as I put it in here, it's just kind of floppy. It just kind of loses any shape, any stability, anything. And the batting is harder to work with. I'm really having to finagle it. It wants to grab in all the wrong places. It just isn't as easy to work with. So batting for quilts when it's in between two pieces of fabric. But here, because you're putting batting and batting together, I just don't, see how it's wimpy inside? I just don't like batting as much. Not to put down batting, but I don't like it as much for this project. So the fusible fleece, the fusible foam, any of those. All right, let me show you a couple smaller ones. Again, this is batting here, and this is the woven fusible. And when I place this in, the batting is going to want to grab, but I'm just going to kind of work at this, and I want you to see that fusible woven interfacing that I have on the inside. The inside needs a little bit of stability. So if you add something on the inside, batting, fusible, whatever it is, don't just think about the outside. That's going to take away a lot of the wonkiness, the big pants, you know, the pants that haven't been ironed, that aren't your size, that kind of thing. So this is just going to help it fit a little bit nicer inside of there. It just gives it a cleaner look. It makes it look nicer. And by the way, remember, if you put this in and you find that this one is just too big, you're just going to pull this out and you're going to stitch just a little bit wider seam allowance. The materials that you're using will make all the difference. Okay, remember when I was looking for that piece earlier and I said don't iron this on first, because when you iron this on first and you have to fold it in half and you go to cut with the 45 millimeter, Zeke, I'm going to have you come in if you don't mind and look right here. It's no big deal because I'm at the sewing machine and I'm going to end up being able to put that in my seam allowance, but this is all raggedy here. This is all raggedy here. This is all raggedy here. It just doesn't look as good and it's harder to cut with the 45 millimeter. If you have a 60 millimeter, go for it. Then go ahead and fuse this on, fold that in half when you go to cut, and you're good to go. 45 millimeter, don't recommend it as much. The 60 millimeter, do recommend it for adding this on before you do the cutting, okay? All right, so same thing, the same basket, but what I did was folded it down. You can see here how this is the same basket, but I folded it over. You could even take this to the sewing machine and do a top stitch on here as well, an edge stitch. I've used a pin, but you can use buttons. You can use whatever it is that you want. Pins would work better than, buttons would work better than pins just for, opening and closing and opening and closing. But it's a cute little bag. Add a strap that goes from here over to here, and it can go on a bike. Add a strap and it can be crossbody. Imagine a cute little bag that you're wearing crossbody with a longer strip. So you can make a little bag out of that as well. All right, I want to show you one other project, and we have a few other things. We're going to make a variation on a theme. Oh, look, I found this one too. Okay, let me grab, let's see, where did I put that? All the way over here. Oh, all my mess. I have one really cool thing I want to show you. Okay, so this right here. Instead of putting your fabric on the fold here, you're going to have a fabric here that is exactly this. So that's this pink. You're going to have another piece of fabric that's exactly this guy here, so no fold. You're going to have a seam allowance here. You're going to do the same thing inside. So you can see I've got 1 fabric, 2 fabrics, 3 fabrics, 4. If we look at all the others, I have 1 and 2, 1 and 2 fabrics here. So this allows you to make a nice multi. I think this is really cute. Add buttons, add whatever little doodads on there, but instead of worrying about the fold, we're not placing on fold. Why would you do something like that? Because you've got smaller pieces of fabrics left over and you still want to use those fabrics, or you have a boring fabric and you just want to dress it up a little bit. So that's a fun one to do too. Okay, vinyl, this guy here, this is one that is really important to know. I love working with vinyls and all the other materials. If this is the inside and this is the outside, I'm going to be in big trouble. Let me show you what I mean. I'm trying to put that inside of there, and do you see how I have all this excess? Now I can certainly cut this down. If I want vinyl on the inside, I know I'm going to need to make it smaller. But let me show you what happens when we have vinyl on the outside and fabric on the inside. The reality of vinyl is if I'm doing vinyl, I'm doing it because it's practical. So I wouldn't do this because it's not as practical, because if you have messy stuff inside of there, the vinyl's not going to do anything except prevent it from dripping. But do you see how that, when I turn these right sides together, see how that fits a whole lot better? As soon as I smooth that out. So this would be the outside, this would be the inside. Or you could do it the other way around too. Again, just make this smaller. That's the big thing there. So you choose what it is you want to do fabric-wise, but I really want you to play around fabric-wise. Okay, so I have a piece of fabric. Everything is pretty much girls stuff that I have here. So I've got this little piece of fabric, and you can see I don't have enough right here. Can you see how I don't have enough? But I want to do something for a boy with this fabric, and it's not going to be cutesy like this, but it's going to look like these when I'm all finished. So you can see this one here. This is this template to here. This is this template to here. This one you can fold down and then take advantage of that lining as part of the decor. Great to put your threads in, to put your needles, to put your bobbins, to put whatever it is. How cute is that? So I want to show you how to cut these. This guy here, again, this is the medium size. This one, the outside here, which is the inside, I actually cut it a little bit higher. Okay, so I'm just going to cut one layer of this. So what do we want to do? We would iron on the Fusible first. Iron on the whatever first, most likely. You can do it with foam if you want to. Now notice here's the fold, and do you see I don't have the fold over here? I don't have the fold. I don't want to turn the template over. I want to turn the fabric over. Now what I do need to do is, again, look at the direction, and I'm seeing Iron Man is going that way. I'm seeing Iron Man is going that way, and this is all directional. So this is the top, and this is the top. So when I put this on here, I want to make sure that I have enough fabric. I'm going to go ahead and cut off a piece here. Make sure I have enough fabric, because the last thing you want to do, if it's a favorite fabric and you only have so much, is to waste the little bit that you have. So we're going to put that on the fold. And if this were really something I was doing, I would go ahead and refold my fabric so I'm not wasting all of that stuff. What I want to do is right here, make sure I have that lined up. I don't care about this. Remember, I don't have enough fabric there. And I want to make sure this is lined up. When I've got that lined up, we're not going to cut up here. We're going to ignore that. We're going to cut here, and I want to go right inside. I want to cut up here. I'm going to cut here. I'm going to cut up here. Make sure I've gone all the way there, and we're going to cut here. And then I do want to cut this piece here. Now, when we're done with that, you can see how I have a couple threads there, and I have a couple threads there. That's where I want to grab my scissors. And when I've got those precision scissors here, we'll just snip a little bit. I don't care if I'm cutting exactly straight, because remember, that's part of our seam allowance. All right, what do I want to do? What I want to do is determine how high I want my basket to be. You can make it taller, knowing that you can fold it down or cut it down. So whichever way you want to do, you can measure out if you want to. You know, look at some of the pencil cases and some of the other cool things that you might be putting stuff in, and you can decide how tall you want it to be. I'm going to go ahead and line this up to my 4, and I'm going to place this on my 12. And I've got between my box pleats, and I've got between my top, from 4 to 12, so I've got 8 inches. When I cut this guy here, we'll sew that side seam, we'll sew down there. We're going to do a box pleat, we're going to do a box pleat that turns into this. All right, so we're going to stitch the bottom here. We're going to go ahead and stitch the side. We'll do our box pleats. Remember, you would be putting some kind of a fusible on here. Whether it's a batting, whether it's foam, go ahead and just listen to some of those things that I mentioned earlier and decide how stiff you want it to be. I'm going to grab my 2 seams, line them up. Remember, one is going to go in one direction, one is going to go in the other direction. And we'll stitch this side. And you can see I wasn't even close to my seam allowance being consistent. I'm okay with that, because this is going to hold crayons. Or this is going to hold whatever, his little action figures, okay? And notice here, because I don't have the seam allowance on one side, I've got a little bit less here than I do on the other, so I will back stitch there. All right, let's cut that out. We're going to head back over to the cutting table, and let's take a look at just this little thing that I've done. All right, so we would have done a lining. We would have done a fusible, and look how tall this guy is. Can you see my 6 inches? This is way tall. Do you want it that tall? Is it going to hold crayons, or are you going to use a fusible foam? But do you see how that can turn into this? So this guy here, you can even do a little drawstring. What's nice about this is you have 1 seam, 2 seams, 3 seams. This turns into this. This is the small template here. And this one is the medium-sized template here. You play with the height, how much you want to cut, but these are perfect. These guys are perfect to do with your scraps of your fusible foam, of your interfacings, of your fabrics that are too small. Okay, guys, we have jumped here, there, everywhere, but I hope you've gotten some good information on making storage pods. Stay tuned. I'll have more videos coming for you, too. If you have any questions for me, please post down below, and I'll be sure to answer. If you do have questions you need answered right away, pick up the phone and call me. 850-449-0259. If you don't have the storage pods, you can get them at my website, winner, W-I-N-N-E-R, designs.com. Follow me on Facebook as well. My Facebook, if you're going to go type it into the search engine, then it's Winner Designs for, F-O-R, sewing, ampersand the and, sewing, and quilting. So Winner Designs for Sewing and Quilting. As soon as you type in Winner Designs for, you're going to see Winner Designs for Sewing and Quilting pop up. If you want to type it into the www, it's www.facebook.com/Linda Winner Designs. Thank you guys so much for sticking through. I hope you got some good information, and I can't wait to see what you all make with these templates. They are so much fun, so addictive. I can't wait to hear from you. Thanks.